This lesson covers the SKUs available for Windows Server 2016. A SKU is a stock keeping unit, an addition of Windows Server. And for Windows Server 2016, there are three primary additions. Essentials. Now, Essentials is aimed at a very small business. It has a 25 user maximum and only supports up to 2 processors. For most medium to large organizations, they will leverage either the standard or data center edition. There is no enterprise edition anymore. That went away a few versions ago of Windows Server. Historically, standard and data center had exactly the same functionality. This has changed in Windows Server 2016. In Windows Server 2016, the Data Center Edition has some new capabilities that are not present in the Standard Edition. Storage Replica, Storage Spaces Direct, Shielded Virtual Machines, and the Software-Defined Networking v2. These are all new capabilities and only available in the Data Center SKU. No functionality was removed from the Standard Edition that was previously present in Windows 2012 R2 Standard Edition. So if I was using functionality under 2012 R2 Standard, that will still be there in the 2016 Standard Edition. It's simply some of the brand new enterprise level features are now only in the Data Center SKU. A big change from previous versions, the 2016 edition is the first version that's actually licensed now by core and not per processor. In the past, we would buy 2 processor socket licenses, and I would have to license every processor socket in the machine. In today's world where processors may have 16 cores, 32 cores, and it keeps growing, Microsoft have made the move to per core processing. Every processor in a box has to be licensed for at least 8 cores, and every machine has to be licensed for at least 16 cores. That really follows the same process as previous versions, where at least 2 sockets always had to be licensed. And Microsoft has a very good white paper that really walks through the licensing and the per core nature and how that translates from previous versions. So this is the licensing datasheet. I've downloaded it. If you just search for Windows Server 2016 licensing datasheet, you'll find this link. And it goes through various pieces of information. But the key part here is the 2016 licensing of the cores. So every physical server will be required to be licensed for all cores. Each processor must be licensed for a minimum of 8 cores. Each physical server must be licensed with a minimum of 2 processors totaling 16 cores. And if I need additional cores, I purchase them in 2 core packs. Now, how this translates is there will be a license grant. So if I had a 2012 R2 license and it was covered by software assurance, I will get a grant of 8 cores per physical processor that was licensed. So there's a nice chart that basically shows if my servers have processors with 8 cores or less, the licensing cost will remain unchanged from Windows Server 2012 R2. It's only when I start having servers with more than 8 cores per processor, well then I may require additional licensing. So that's really the major licensing change from Windows Server 2012 R2, that per core shift. And System Center 2016 has done the same licensing shift. That is also now licensed per core. The virtual instance rights remain the same. For Standard Edition, for every core when it's licensed, I get 2 virtual instances that can be running Windows Server. If I purchase Data Center Edition, I can run an unlimited number of virtual machines running Windows Server. Now, if I'm running other operating systems that are licensed separately, such as Windows Client, such as Linux, that doesn't matter. It's not limiting the number of VMs you can run. It's just stipulating that as part of my host license, it includes a certain number of Windows Server guests. So if I installed Windows Server Standard and it was a Hyper-V host, and I had 2 virtual machines on that box that were going to run VMs running Windows Server, well, those 2 VMs are covered by my host license. If I had a bunch of Linux VMs and Windows Client VMs on the same host, that's fine. as long as they were licensed on their own. If I'm heavily virtualized, you're probably going to want to use Data Center Edition because of that unlimited number of Windows Server virtual machines. There are also a storage server SKU focusing on a storage appliance type functionality, and a multi-point premium server for certain scenarios where I want the multi-point functionality, which allows me to have multiple keyboards, mice, and displays attached to a single machine, historically heavily used in education. I can have lots of student machines connected to a single physical box. There is also the free Microsoft Hyper-V Server 2016, which is a pure hypervisor aimed at scenarios where I don't want to run Windows Server guests, I want to run Windows Client, maybe it's a VDI environment, or Linux guests. But these are the key versions of Windows Server 2016. For most environments, you'll be focusing on the Standard Edition and the Data Center Edition. Realize the only real difference outside the virtual instance rights are now Data Center has those additional capabilities. The enterprise storage with Storage Replica and Storage Spaces Direct, the new software-defined networking V2 stack, and shielded virtual machines.